The gavel came down at exactly 10:17 on a Tuesday morning. But before that sound, before the courtroom erupted into the controlled chaos of a verdict being recorded, there was another sound. A sound that had traveled through 23 years of silence. A sound that began in a hospital nursery in the middle of the night and never quite stopped echoing. The woman in the cream-colored suit stood at the front of the room. Her hands were folded in front of her. Her back was straight in a way that cost something. And when the judge read the words that made everything official, she closed her eyes. Not in relief. Not in victory. In memory. 'Cause 72 hours earlier, she had been someone else entirely. She had been standing in a doorway she had no right to stand in, holding a necklace that should not have existed anymore, and watching a woman she had never met fall to her knees. That moment did not make the news. The news made the verdict. The news made the inheritance. But the story started before any of that. The story started with a bus ticket, a dying woman's last breath, and a secret that had been folded into newspaper clippings and hidden under a bed for almost a quarter of a century. My people, grab your popcorn, settle in, and enjoy. Please like, subscribe, and drop your city and local time in the comments right now. Let us begin to understand why that gavel mattered so much. We have to go back. We have to go back to a small apartment in the Surulere area of Lagos. 3rd floor, no elevator. A window that faced another building so closely that you could see the neighbor's laundry hanging if you leaned far enough to the right. The paint on the ceiling was cracking in patterns that looked like rivers. And the woman on the bed in that room was dying. Not dramatically. Not the way they die in films, with soft lighting and last-minute reconciliations and flowers that stay fresh for exactly the right amount of time. She was dying the way people die when they have been holding something heavy for too long. Quietly. With a kind of tired dignity that did not ask for attention. Her name was Grace. Everyone who had ever loved her called her Mama Grace. She was 59 years old. She had worked as a cleaner in private homes and office buildings and the kind of places where people pass you in corridors and do not see your face. She had been doing it for 31 years. Her hands were rough in the way that hands get rough when they have been holding mops and scrubbing floors and carrying buckets of water that were too heavy for her frame. Her back had the particular curve of someone who has spent decades leaning forward. She had one biological daughter. A girl named Amara who had moved to Abuja and called every 2 weeks, sometimes 3, sometimes not at all when life got busy in the way that life gets busy for people who are trying to build something. And she had raised another girl. A girl she had taken in when that girl was so small she fit in the crook of one arm. That girl was now 24 years old. And she was sitting beside the bed. Her name was Chidinma. Mama Grace's voice was dry. The way old paper sounds when you unfold it after years of being folded in the same place. The way something fragile sounds when it is about to break and is trying very hard not to. Come closer. Chidinma leaned in. She had learned over years of living with this woman that there were times when speaking would break something that was trying to form. That the wrong word, even one spoken with love, would push the truth back down into the place where it had been hiding. And you would wait another year, another decade, for another moment like this one to come again. She waited. I have something to tell you, the old woman said. I should have told you long ago. But I was afraid. And then I was ashamed. And by the time the shame passed, too many years had gone. And I could not find the right place to start. She breathed. Pause between her sentences was long in the way that pauses are long for people who are rationing air. Each breath came with effort. Each word cost her something. There is no right place to start with something like this, she continued. You just have to start. I did not find you, Mama Grace said. I took you. A generator kicked on somewhere down the street. A motorcycle passed. Life went on in that cheerful, indifferent way that life has of going on while everything changes. She did not tell Chidinma everything. She was too weak for everything. But she told her enough. The outline. The shape of it. the part that mattered most. She told her about the necklace. A gold pendant. Small, delicate, a design that had been custom-made. No others like it. There were initials engraved on the inside. 2 letters. The initials of a woman whose name Chidinma had never heard spoken in this house. A woman who had been searching for her daughter for 24 years. One day, Mama Grace whispered, her fingers barely touching the gold that rested against Chidinma's throat, "This will take you home." She died 7 days later. August 12, 2024. In that same room, in that same air that smelled of old wood and the particular ointment that the neighbor brought because she was that kind of neighbor. In the silence that filled a space where someone has been sick for a long time and has finally stopped breathing. Chidinma sat in that silence for a long time after the last breath. Then she got up and began the arrangements because someone had to. Because there was no one else. She paid for the funeral with the money she had been saving for a course, for a future version of herself that could breathe a little easier. She spent it all on a coffin and a burial plot and food for the people who came to eat and talk and eat some more because that is what people do at funerals in this country. You cannot tell them not to. Then she went back to the room and found the box. It was under the bed. A metal biscuit tin with a lid that had rusted at the edges from years of exposure to damp air. Inside, a Bible with a cracked spine. 3 photographs she had never seen before. A hospital wristband dated 2001. And 15 newspaper pages folded with the careful deliberateness of someone who understood exactly what they were preserving. Chidinma sat on the floor of that room. The room that smelled like Mama Grace. The room that would always smell like Mama Grace until it was cleaned and someone else moved in and someone else's life replaced the traces of hers. She unfolded the first page. The headline read, "Billionaire's newborn daughter missing. Oni family offers 50 million naira reward." No leads. The Guardian newspaper. March 19, 2001. There were photographs. A hospital corridor under fluorescent lights. A man in a dark suit with his hand over his mouth. A woman who looked like she had been broken open in a particular way. Not the breaking of glass, which is sudden and clean, but the breaking of something that was built to last, which is slow and which the person wearing it still has to carry. And in the text, a description of the only clue police had to work with. A gold pendant necklace with a design that had been custom-made. One of a kind. Engraved with the initials of the mother who had placed it around her daughter's neck on the night she was born. Chidinma's hand went to her throat. She read the other 14 pages slowly. They were from different years. 2001, 2003, 2006, 2009, 2012, 2015. The later ones were shorter. The story of a missing child grows shorter over time in the press. Some point it becomes a single paragraph in a year-end summary. Some point even that stops. But Mama Grace had kept them all. Folded and ordered by date. In a biscuit tin under her bed for 23 years. Chidinma thought about what that meant. What it meant to keep something like that. Not to throw it away. Not to burn it. But to fold it and preserve it and slide it under the bed where it would stay, silent and waiting. She thought about what Mama Grace had said on her deathbed. "One day this will take you home." Mama Grace had not been keeping those newspapers to hide the truth. She had been keeping them so that the truth could be found. Chidinma sat on that floor until the room went dark around her. Then she picked up her phone, searched the name Oni Foundation, and found the announcement. The Adeola Oni Foundation Annual Charity Gala. December 19, 2024. Co Hotel and Suites, Victoria Island, Lagos. It had been held every December 19th for 21 years. On the anniversary, year after year, by a mother who was doing the only thing she knew how to do with a grief that had no resolution. Chidinma did not have a plan. She never had a plan. She had a necklace, a dead woman's words, and a biscuit tin full of newspaper clippings. She bought a bus ticket to Lagos. Chidinma arrived in Lagos on a Thursday in May with one bag and 37,000 naira. Enough for maybe 2 weeks if she was very careful. She had the address of a cousin of a friend from her street in Port Harcourt. Someone who might know someone who was hiring. Cousin did not know anyone currently hiring. But the cousin's neighbor worked in housekeeping at Eco Hotel on Victoria Island. And after 2 weeks of sleeping on a mat in that corridor and eating whatever was offered without asking what it was, Chidinma applied for the housekeeping position at Eco Hotel. She was not hired immediately. The hiring manager looked at her documentation. Secondary school certificate. 1 year of vocational training. No hotel experience. He asked her why she wanted to work at Eco Hotel. Specifically, "I want to learn from the best, sir," she said. He studied her for a moment with the flat, experienced look of a man who has heard every answer to that question. Then he said, "Come back Monday for a trial shift." She came back Monday. 6 months later, she was still there. In those 6 months, she learned the hotel the way a person learns a building they have decided to understand fully. She learned the schedule of every recurring event. She learned the names of the regular guests who came for business and the ones who came for pleasure and the ones who came because a hotel lobby was somewhere to be that was not somewhere else. She learned that the housekeeping supervisor kept extra sanitary pads in her desk drawer and would give you one if you asked discreetly. She learned that the kitchen manager on the morning shift was strict about uniforms but would cover for you if you needed a few minutes to make a personal call, because he had been a junior staff member once and remembered what it was to be without a safety net. She learned that Eco Hotel hosted the Adeola Oni Foundation Gala every year on December 19th. That the booking had been in place for 21 consecutive years. That the same florist was used. That the same string quartet was booked 12 months in advance. She learned that the head table always had 10 seats. And that for 21 years one of those seats had been occupied by the same woman, Adeola Oni herself. The founder. The matriarch. The mother who had never stopped searching. Chidinma watched. She waited. She went home to her rented room in Ajigunal and lay in the dark and thought about what she was going to do. She arrived at no clean answer. But she kept going back to work because the alternative was to leave the only place where she was close enough to the truth to feel its presence. Her supervisor, Kunal, was 33 years old. Housekeeping supervisor, 5 years at Eco Hotel. The kind of professional who set a standard without making it feel like a standard was being set. He had seen hundreds of temporary staff come through and disappear. Chidinma did not disappear. She was not showy. She was simply present and precise. She paid attention to things that did not require attention from her. She remembered which rooms had guests who preferred extra towels. She remembered the ones who were particular about how their pillows were arranged. She remembered the small things that other people forgot. Kunal noticed this. "I am putting you on the VIP floor tonight," he told her on the morning of December 19th, the penthouse suite. Main host family. You stay within 3 meters of that suite for the entire evening. You do not leave unless I tell you directly. Clear? Yes, sir, Chidinma said. She went to the changing room at 6:15 that evening. She tucked in her uniform shirt. She stood in front of the small mirror above the lockers and looked at the necklace. The gold pendant. The initials. 6 months. She had been in this building for 6 months and had not been able to do the one thing she had come here to do. To simply stand in front of the woman and say, "I think I might be your daughter. Look at this necklace. The woman who raised me told me with her last breath that it belonged to my real family. Look at it and tell me what you see." She had been afraid. Not of the answer. Of the wrong answer. Of being sent away before the question could be properly asked. Tonight she would be assigned to the main host's suite. She would be less than a meter away. And whatever happened, whatever she found the courage to do or failed to find the courage to do, she was going to be in the room. She straightened her collar. She went out to the floor. By 7:30, the Eco Hotel ballroom had been transformed into something that did not belong to ordinary life. 300 guests moved through it in evening gowns and agbatas and European suits that had been pressed with the particular care that people reserve for clothes they rarely have occasion to wear. The string quartet near the windows played something that floated above the conversation without interrupting it. Ice sculptures caught the chandelier light in 3 different places. The floral centerpieces had been imported from the Netherlands, a fact the event's coordinator had mentioned to enough people that it had become part of the evening's ambient texture. The head table, 10 seats. Candles. The best view of the room. People who mattered most to the evening were arranged around it. Adeola Oni sat at the center. She was 56 years old and holding herself with the stillness that comes not from peace but from practice. The kind that takes years to build and costs something every time you maintain it. People who watch her mistake it for elegance. Her husband, Tund, sat to her right. A large, quiet man whose face had the particular texture of someone who has accepted a loss without quite finishing the accepting. Beside them, the board members. The foundation's legal advisor. And then there was Funk. Funk. Adela's niece. Daughter of Adela's late sister, Bizi. She had been the one to fill the empty space beside Adeola at every major Oni family event since 2001. The year that the seat that should have been a daughter's had to be someone else's. She wore black velvet and pearls at her ears and the easy posture of a woman who has sat at this particular table for so long that it no longer occurs to her to wonder whether she belongs there. She had been 11 years old in 2001 when it happened. Old enough to understand the mechanics of the plan she had not made. That was Funk's particular talent. Even at 11, she understood mechanics. She had watched the chaos of the search, the grief, the foundation, the 21 consecutive galas. She had sat beside Adeola at all of them, and she had done it well. The hand on the shoulder at the right moment, quiet word when it was needed. Presence of someone who was not a daughter but who was there, who had always been there. Over time, she had built something in that space. Not love, or not only love, but position. Inheritance. The future shape of a life built on 23 years of standing in for someone who was never going to come back. Or so she had believed for 23 years. With the confidence of someone who had paid for that belief and believed the payment was permanent. She was not nervous. The housekeeping staff moving between the rooms on the far side of the floor were nothing to Funk. Invisible. She reached for her wine, leaned toward the legal advisor beside her, and did not look at the housekeeper again. That was her first mistake. It would not be her last. 9:47 in the evening, Chidinma was moving toward the penthouse suite with a tray of champagne glasses. She had been to the suite twice already. At 8:15 and at 9. Both times, she had leaned across to refill Adela's glass from less than a meter away. The suite had been busy both times. Conversation loud. No one had looked at the housekeeper. This was not unusual. In rooms like this, the people who carry the glasses exist in a parallel layer of the world. You see the glass. You do not see the hand. This time, the suite was quieter. Tund had stepped away briefly. The legal advisor was speaking to someone on his left. Adeola was listening with her chin slightly down, which meant that when Chidinma bent to pour, the two of them were briefly very close. Close enough for the chandelier light to catch the gold pendant and throw it back. Briefly. Gold on gold. Adeola stopped mid-breath. Her eyes dropped to the necklace. And held there. The legal advisor finished what he was saying. Nobody answered him. Around Adeola, the suite continued to exist. Candles. Conversation. The ice sculptures melting slowly on their stands. But Adeola was somewhere else entirely. Looking at a piece of gold smaller than her thumbnail with an expression that had no clean name. Not pain. Not joy. Not hope. The specific condition of someone for whom all three have collapsed into a single sensation that the body has not been built to hold comfortably. She stood up. She walked around the table with the direct, unhurried pace of someone crossing a room they have walked across 10,000 times. Not a ballroom full of 300 people watching. Chidinma was still holding the tray. Still mid-pour. She looked up, confused. Adila's hands locked around her wrist. The tray went. 6 champagne glasses hit the marble floor in a slow cascade. Not all at once. In sequence. One after another. The sound of each one landing slightly delayed from the last, which made it somehow worse than if they had all gone together. A sound that cut clean through everything. The string quartet. The 300 conversations. The ambient hum of an expensive room doing what expensive rooms do. Silence. Adeola was holding Chidinma's wrist with both hands. She was not looking at the mess on the floor. Not looking at the broken glass. Not looking at the champagne spreading across the marble. She was looking at the necklace. And the expression on her face was doing something that a face should not do in public. It was opening the way a wound opens when the pressure that was holding it closed is suddenly removed. "Where did you get this?" Her voice came out cracked at the end. Low and cracked. "Where did you get this necklace?" Chidinma felt the grip. She felt 300 pairs of eyes. She felt the tray somewhere on the floor behind her. Her heart was doing something fast and strange. But her voice, when it came, was steadier than she had expected. "Ma," she said. "Please. You are hurting me." Funk saw all of it from the head table. She saw Adeola stand. She tracked the walk. She saw the grip and the sound of breaking glass and the expression on her aunt's face, an expression she had never seen on that face in 33 years. An expression she had made a private, sustained effort never to be in a room where she would have to see. In the 3 seconds it took the champagne tray to hit the floor, Funk understood exactly what was happening. In the 4 seconds after that, she made a decision. She pushed her chair back. She stood. She smoothed the front of her gown with one hand. She crossed the floor with a smile already arranged on her face. Not the smile of a woman who was afraid. Careful, functional smile of a woman who was about to manage a difficult situation the way she had managed difficult situations her entire adult life. Quickly. Efficiently. Before the damage spread. She inserted herself between Adeola and Chidinma. She turned to the hotel manager, who had appeared with the speed that hotel managers develop through years of catastrophe training. "Mr. Adeyemi," she said, her voice bright and hard as a new coin. "This young woman is wearing something that belongs to our family. I need you to call security immediately. And I need this handled quietly, without further disruption to our guests." The manager was already nodding, already apologizing, already gesturing to his earpiece. "Of course, Ma. Of course. I am so sorry. I did not steal anything." Chidinma's voice came out clear. Not loud. Not desperate. Clear in the way that water is clear. Not because it forces itself to be, but because that is simply its nature. "This necklace was given to me by my mother." Funk turned and looked at her for the first time without the pretense of management. What she gave Chidinma was not fury. Fury would have been too direct, too personal, too much like an admission that the situation required real engagement. What she gave her was contempt. The efficient contempt of someone who has decided another person is beneath the cost of actual feeling. "Your mother." She let the words sit in the air. Let the room hear them. "Your mother. Tell me, what kind of market does your mother shop from that she found a 3.7 million naira custom-made necklace to hand down to a hotel housekeeper?" She gestured at the broken glass without looking at it. "You have already destroyed 600,000 naira worth of crystal on what is our foundation's most important evening of the year. And now you want to stand in this room in front of our guests and tell stories?" She turned back to the manager. "Security. Right now. Please." Two security guards arrived from opposite corners of the room. 300 guests had gone very still. The string quartet had stopped entirely. Someone at a far table was leaning across to whisper something to their companion, who held up a hand to tell them to be quiet and kept watching. Kunal was on the far side of the ballroom when he heard the glass break. He came quickly, not running because you did not run in this room during an event that was the kind of thing careers did not recover from, and took in the scene in a sweep. Chidinma. Two security guards. Funk. The broken glass catching the chandelier light from the floor. And Adeola, who was still holding Chidinma's wrist and looking at the necklace with the face of someone who has just been handed something they had stopped allowing themselves to want. He moved forward. "Excuse me, Ma." He addressed Funk with the professional calm of a man holding something firmly in check underneath it. "I am Kunal, head of floor services. I apologize for the disturbance. If there is a concern regarding a member of my staff, I would like to handle this through the appropriate." "You would like to what?" Funk turned and looked at him with the same eraser she had given Chidinma. Not anger. Something that was the removal of recognition. "You are a housekeeper. Your job tonight is to clean up this glass and to ensure the comfort of our other guests. That is what your job is. Do you understand me? Stay in your lane, my friend." Kunal's jaw tightened. He did not step back. "With all due respect, Ma, I did not ask for your respect. I asked you to clean the glass." The security guards had Chidinma by both arms now. Not roughly. Firmly. She was not fighting them. She stood straight, chin level, her hands loose at her sides. And she kept her eyes on Adeola Oni's face. And then Adeola, who had been standing like someone in the eye of a storm, very still while everything moved around her, spoke again. Not to Funk. Not to security. To the girl in the white uniform. "What was your mother's name?" Question dropped into the room and took all the air with it. Funk's head turned sharply. "Auntie Adeola, there is really no need to." "What was your mother's name?" Adeola did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Chidinma met her eyes directly. Her name was Grace. Grace Okonkwo. But everyone who knew her called her Mama Grace. She died in Port Harcourt on August 12th this year. A sound moved through the room. Not a gasp. Something quieter and more collective than that. The sound of 300 people inhaling slightly and not exhaling all the way. Adeola let go of Chidinma's wrist. She took one step back. Tund had come to stand beside her. No one had seen him move. He had simply arrived the way husbands arrive in moments that matter most. He put his hand on Adeola's shoulder. She covered it with both of hers. Neither of them said a word. Funk's expression had rearranged itself. Performance of outrage was gone. What replaced it was something carefully flattened. Practiced blankness. The face of someone who has trained herself over a long period of time not to give anything to anyone who might one day need to use it against her. The hotel manager stepped forward. He addressed the room with the cheerful professionalism of a man earning every naira of his salary tonight. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the brief interruption. Fresh champagne will be brought immediately. Please do enjoy your evening." The string quartet, understanding its purpose, resumed playing. Chidinma was escorted through a door behind the kitchen. She sat in a chair that was too small for the desk it faced. The room smelled of printer toner and institutional cleaning fluid, the kind that meant someone had mopped recently and thoroughly. One security guard stood near the door, arms at his sides, looking at a point in the middle distance that was not anything in particular. From somewhere beyond the wall, muffled, she could hear the gala. The string quartet. The rise and fall of 300 conversations. The occasional sound of someone laughing at exactly the right volume for the room. Kunal appeared in the doorway 14 minutes later. He had apparently negotiated with someone for access because he was carrying a paper cup of water, which he sat on the desk in front of her without announcement. Chidinma. He kept his voice low. The security guard had shifted slightly toward the door, granting them the approximate privacy of a man pretending not to hear. Are you okay? She looked at him. I am managing. He looked at the necklace. He looked at her face. He was a man composing several questions he had decided it was not his place to ask. At least not tonight. At least not in this room. Don't sign anything tonight, he said. Whatever they ask you to sign. Whatever they tell you it means. Don't. Not without speaking to someone who is on your side first. He left before she could answer. She sat in that room for 22 minutes. Then the door opened. And it was not the security guards. It was not the hotel manager. It was not Adeola or Tund. It was Funk. She came in alone. She closed the door quietly behind her. She did not sit. Sitting would have placed her at the same level as Chidinma, and that was not the arrangement she was proposing. She stood on the opposite side of the desk and looked at Chidinma with the calm, methodical attention of someone solving a problem. Not feeling it. Solving it. She set an envelope on the desk. 500,000 naira, she said. Cash. Tonight. Chidinma looked at the envelope. She did not move toward it. Here is what I am asking. Funk's voice was smooth and reasonable. The voice of someone who has been reasonable in difficult rooms many times before and knows which register works. You wrote a simple statement that you purchased this necklace secondhand from a market trader somewhere in Port Harcourt. You decide the details. You hand the necklace over tonight. You take the money. You go back to your life. She paused. I understand you have burial debts still outstanding from your mother's passing. 500,000 naira will clear all of that and leave you with enough for several months of rent and living. This is not a small amount. I am not treating you as a small person. I am treating you as someone who has a problem and who I am giving a clean way out of that problem. Chidinma looked at the envelope for a moment. She thought about what 500,000 naira would feel like. She thought about the funeral bills, which she still owed in part. She thought about the room she rented in Ajigunal, the uniform she was still wearing, the 6 months of 11-hour shifts. She thought about the mat on the floor in that corridor in Suralere. The 37,000 naira she had arrived in Lagos with that was long gone now. Then she thought about Mama Grace on that bed. Cracking paint on the ceiling. One day this will take you home. You know what this necklace is, she said. It was not a question. Funk held her gaze and did not answer. You knew the moment you looked at it. That is why you moved so fast. That is why you needed security before Madame Adeola could finish asking me a single thing. Chidinma's voice was steady in a way that surprised her, coming out of her own mouth. You are not protecting the family from a thief. You are protecting yourself from the truth. Something moved behind Funk's eyes. Control. Quick. Gone. You are a clever girl, she said. Not as a compliment. As an assessment. But clever without money in this city is just sound that the air carries away and nobody keeps. Take the money. Go home. Put your mother to rest properly. That is the smart thing. Chidinma picked up the envelope. She held it. She felt its weight. Solid. Real. More money than she had held at one time in her life. She thought the smart thing. She thought, put your mother to rest. She placed the envelope back on the desk. My mother told me with the last breath she had that this necklace belonged to my real family. That it would take me home. She folded her hands in her lap. I did not travel from Port Harcourt to Lagos. Spend 6 months in this hotel waiting for December 19th, sit in this room, and take 500,000 naira and walk away from that. She looked at Funk directly. I will not sign anything. I will not give you this necklace. And if you are what I believe you to be in all of this, I suggest you go and prepare yourself. Because I am not leaving this building without answers. 8 seconds of silence. Funk straightened. She took the envelope. She smoothed the front of her gown in a gesture that was so practiced it had become reflex. The body doing what it had learned to do in moments that required composure. She walked to the door without another word. She paused briefly with her hand on the door handle. She did not turn around. She did not say anything. She opened the door and went out. Chidinma sat in the quiet she left behind. Somewhere through the wall, the string quartet was playing something slow and mournful that the players probably did not know was appropriate. She touched the gold pendant at her throat. She waited. Tundoni was in Abuja when his phone rang at 9:52 that night. His driver had him at the airport by 10:47. He was on the last Lagos-bound flight. He spent the flight looking at a photograph Adeola had sent him, taken in the seconds before security arrived. With the small camera she always carried because her close-up vision was not what it had been. A young woman in a white hotel uniform. At her throat, a gold pendant no bigger than a thumbnail. Tund had bought that necklace at a jeweler on the island in August 1999. He remembered the jeweler. A small man with reading glasses on a chain, pulling out a sketchbook and asking him to describe exactly what he wanted. There was no catalog item that matched what Tund had in mind. He had chosen the design because Adeola had always said the moon was the one thing in the sky that could be half dark and still give light. He had asked for the initials on the inside. Not just initials. A name. One item. One order. One necklace produced. The jeweler had shown him the receipt when he collected it. He had emailed his archive manager from the airport at 11:03. By the time the plane landed, a photograph of that invoice had been sent to his phone. He landed in Lagos at 1:17 in the morning. Adeola had refused to go home. He found her in the Eco Hotel lobby in a chair near a window. Hands in her lap. Eyes on the main entrance. Beside her sat Barrister Femi Akinlade, the family's lawyer, who had driven from Ikoyi at Adela's call without complaint. 2 chairs down, reviewing material on his phone with the fixed attention of someone rereading what they had already memorized, sat a man Tund had not seen in 8 years. Retired Chief Superintendent of Police Adebayo Ogunlai, 63 years old. Former head of the Lagos Missing Persons Investigation Unit. He had taken the Adeola Oni case in February 2001. He had carried it through 18 years of departmental transfers and changing superiors and the quiet institutional pressure to close old files. He had never closed it. Tund stopped in front of him. Ogunlai stood. They shook hands in the way men shake hands when there is too much to say and no right beginning for any of it. Chief Oni. Ogunlai's voice was even. I have been waiting for this phone call for a very long time. Let us go and see what we have. They brought Chidinma to the hotel manager's conference room at 2 in the morning. Proper room this time. Long table. Matched chairs. Water bottles someone had placed at each seat with the reflexive hospitality of hotel staff doing their job under any circumstances. Chidinma walked in and sat across from Adeola and Tund Oni for the first time without a tray between them. Without a uniform that meant something specific about who she was in relation to who they were. Adeola was looking at her quietly with the total attention of someone trying to memorize something at the same moment they are trying to believe it is actually in front of them. Tund placed the invoice photograph on the table. One item. One necklace. Retired Chief Superintendent Ogunlai opened his notebook. My daughter, he said to Chidinma. And the address was not casual. It was deliberate. A small kindness from a man who had spent 18 years carrying the memory of a child who had needed one. I am going to ask you some questions. Answer exactly what you know. There is no right or wrong. Yes, sir. When were you born? May 14th, 2001. Are you certain? That is what Mama Grace always told me. My school certificate says the same. And where were you born? Which hospital? She paused. I do not know a hospital. Mama told me she delivered me at home. She did not give me a birth certificate until I was 12. She said the delay was because of the home delivery. Chidinma wrote in his notebook. He did not explain what he wrote. How long did you know that the woman who raised you was not your biological mother? 7 days. She told me on her deathbed. Did she give you a name? Anything about your biological family? She was too weak by then for all of it. But she told me the necklace was from them. That one day it would take me home. Why did you come to Lagos? Why this hotel? Why December 19th? Chidinma looked at Adeola when she answered. 'Cause the answer was really for Adeola. Because in a tin box under her bed I found 15 newspaper clippings. All from different years. All about the same story. A newborn girl taken from a Lagos hospital on December 19th, 2000. And the description of the necklace was exact. She touched the pendant briefly. Then put her hand back in her lap. I did not have a lawyer. I had no evidence that anyone would find convincing. I had 37,000 naira in my account and no connection to anyone in this city who could open a door for me. So I found out where the annual gala was. I applied to work at this hotel. I thought, if I could be in the room close enough for long enough, something would open. I would know what to do when the time came. She stopped. I was running out of ideas. Tonight was December 19th. I did not know what else there was after tonight. A silence in which the water bottles sweated quietly on the table. Tun said very quietly, You came looking for us. I came looking for the truth, Chidinma said. I have been looking for it since August. Adeola pressed one flat palm against the table. The gesture of a woman keeping herself in her own body by deliberate effort. Ogunlai set his pen down. Let me explain what needs to happen next, he said. And I am going to explain it to every person in this room, including you, Chidinma, because you have the right to understand every step of what you are entering. He explained the DNA registry. He explained that Nigeria had operated a missing persons DNA database through the Lagos State Health Management Agency since 2006, linked to the Interpol iFamilia International Kinship Network. He explained that Adeola and Tund had registered their biological profiles in 2008 at his recommendation, because he had told them at one of many review meetings that the science would eventually catch up to this case, and that when it did, they should already be in the system. He explained cheek swabs. Cotton tip inside the cheek. 30 seconds. Enough material for a complete kinship analysis. Chain of custody. Samples collected in the presence of a neutral medical officer. Sealed and signed by witnesses from both sides. Processed at a certified forensic laboratory under the DNA Evidence Protection Act of 2022. No interference with the process legally possible. No procedural challenge could succeed. He explained what 99.9997% probability meant in a forensic context. That it was not estimation. That it was mathematical certainty rendered into a number because the law required a number. Because saying beyond all doubt was not specific enough for a courtroom. Whatever the result is, Ogunlai said, it will be final. And it will hold. He looked at Chidinma. Are you willing? Yes, she said. Without pause. Without the half-second of uncertainty that people have when they are deciding something rather than confirming it. The forensic medical officer arrived at 3:15 in the morning with a sealed collection kit. She took cheek swabs from Adeola, Tund, and Chidinma. She sealed each sample in front of the lawyer, Ogunlai, and the hotel manager who had not gone home and was now a witness to something he would be telling people about for a long time. She initialed each seal. All four signed the chain of custody form in the proper order. The samples left the hotel at 3:47 in the morning in a sealed, logged courier vehicle. 72 hours. December 22nd. In those 72 hours, Lagos went about its business the way Lagos does. Completely. Loudly. Without any awareness of or interest in the earthquake happening quietly inside one family on the island. Adeola went home and did not sleep. She sat in the armchair in her bedroom and looked at the photograph on her phone and did not eat the food her housekeeper brought on a tray. She did not answer calls except two. One from Ogunlai with an update. One from Tun's sister, who was told gently that it was too early and to wait. She looked at the photograph many times over the course of those 3 days. She was looking for something. Not the necklace. She had seen the necklace. The necklace was not what she was looking for. She was looking at the way the girl held her chin. The particular way her face composed itself when she was keeping something in. There was a face Adeola remembered from the mirror from her 20s. From the years before this grief had changed the way she stood in photographs. And she was looking for it in a housekeeper she had met for the first time 2 days ago in a ballroom. She thought she found it. In a photograph taken from 4 meters away under chandelier light. In the angle of a jaw. In the set of 2 eyes that had not looked away from her even when they should have. She thought, I know you. She had been thinking it for 48 hours. And she was not going to say it to anyone until the result was in her hands. But she was thinking it. Tun drove. The way some men pray. Alone. At odd hours. No destination that could be given to someone asking. He drove past the hospital on the island where his daughter had been born. He had not driven that road in 7 years. He drove it 4 times that night. On the 3rd pass, he stopped the car in front of the hospital entrance. He sat there for 17 minutes without getting out. The night security guard at the gate looked at the idling car twice. Then looked away. Because in Lagos you learn quickly which situations require intervention and which ones require the grace of not noticing. Tund was not doing anything in those 17 minutes. He was just in the place where it had begun. That was all. Sometimes that is the only thing available to a person who has been waiting a long time. To return to the starting point and sit in it. Let time accumulate there for a while. Then he drove home. And Funk went home to Lekki Phase 1. Poured whiskey she did not drink. Made phone calls. The approach was made to a junior employee at the forensic laboratory on the afternoon of December 20th. The offer, 2,300,000 naira cash. To delay the results by a minimum of 4 weeks. Or if delay was not achievable, to introduce a procedural error that would invalidate the samples and require recollection. The employee said he would think about it. He did not think about it long. By 3 o'clock the same day, he had reported the approach to his supervisor, who reported it to the laboratory director, who called Ogunlai, who called the Lagos State Criminal Investigation Department. By 5 o'clock, the attempt had been documented, witnessed, time-stamped, and added to a file that had been growing for 18 years. The clock continued. On the morning of December 21st, Chidinma woke on the floor of an apartment in Surulere. Kunal's sister, Funmilayo, had offered it when Kunal explained, without saying too much because there was not much he could say yet, that Chidinma needed somewhere that was not her usual room. Funmilayo cooked at 6 in the morning. She cooked for 2 and said nothing about the circumstances. She waited until Chidinma had eaten before she said anything at all. Then she said, "You are cutting that yam like it owes you money." Chidinma looked down at the plate. She had been making the pieces very small. "I am thinking," she said. "I can see that." Funmilayo leaned against the counter. "My brother told me a little." "Enough." She looked at Chidinma directly. 6 months you spent in that hotel. 6 months getting up every morning and putting on that uniform and going back. That is not luck. That is not coincidence. That is character wearing itself down to its bones to get to something real. Chidinma was quiet for a moment. Mama Grace used to say that character is what you carry when you have nothing else left to carry it with, she said. Funmileo nodded once, as if she already knew that and was glad to hear it confirmed. Smart woman, your mother. And despite everything, the 72 hours counting down, Funk's envelope on that desk, Mama Grace's last breath and the biscuit tin and 23 years of a life borrowed without her permission. Chidinma laughed. Short. Surprised. Completely real. Funmileo went back to the stove and left the laugh where it landed. Which was exactly right. December 22nd, 11:23 in the morning. The Oni family residence on the island. The formal sitting room. High ceilings. Family photographs on the walls. The oil painting of the Lagos waterfront above the fireplace. The mantelpiece clock that had been in Adila's family for 40 years. The kind of room that had been arranged and rearranged with care for 23 years. Always with one person missing. Present Adeola. Tund. Barrister Akinlaid. Chief Superintendent Ogunlai. The Forensic Medical Officer. Funk. Chidinma. Kunnel. Kunnel was there because Chidinma had asked if he could be. And no one had said no. In the car on the way here, he had said only, "Whatever happens in that room, you were already who you are before any of this. Remember that." She had looked out the window and not answered. But she had been holding it the whole way across Lagos. Funk sat apart from Adeola and Tund. On the left side of the room, in a chair she had chosen herself. White blouse. Dark trousers. Face arranged with the careful blankness of someone who had been preparing it since early morning. She was very still. The stillness of someone who has done what they could do and is now in the place where what they could do has run out. The forensic medical officer opened the sealed envelope. DNA Kinship Analysis Report. Reference number BFL 202412190001. Conducted under the authority of the Lagos State DNA Evidence Protection Protocol. Chain of custody complete and verified. She paused. Moved across the page with the professional calm of a woman for whom procedure was the only appropriate anchor in a room full of feeling. The probability of biological parent-child relationship between sample A and sample C is 99.9997%. Probability of biological parent-child relationship between sample B and sample C is 99.9997%. Both are consistent and mutually reinforcing. She set the paper down. They are biological mother and daughter, and biological father and daughter. This result is conclusive. Nobody moved. Clock on the mantelpiece ticked. Sighed, a car horn on the street absorbed quickly into the general sound of Lagos. Inside the room, Adeola sat absolutely still for 5 seconds. Tund sat still for 4. Then something that had been held rigid inside him for 23 years. Something maintained through willpower and discipline and the refusal to come apart in front of his wife. Simply released. He bent forward in his chair and put his face in his hands. He made a sound that had no word for it in any language that had ever been spoken. Adeola did not make a sound. She stood. She walked across the room. She stood in front of Chidinma. Chidinma stood. They looked at each other from less than an arm's length. Neither reached out first. There was something here too large for the first gesture. 23 years of it pressing against a door that had been closed a very long time. Neither of them knew exactly how to open it now that the moment had come. Then Adeola raised one hand. She touched the necklace. One finger. Pendant. The same way Mama Grace had touched it. The same specific gesture. Not grasping. Not claiming. Touching. "I put this on your neck the night you were born," Adeola said. Her voice was steady in the way that costs everything to keep steady. "Your father chose the design because I had told him once that the moon was the only thing in the sky that could be half in darkness and still give light." I wanted you to have it from your first night. She paused. I thought I would know you when I saw you. Something in the steadiness gave very quietly. I did know you. The moment I saw this necklace, something in me already knew. Chidinma. She opened her arms. Chidinma, who had held herself together through Mama Grace's deathbed and the bus and 6 months of shifts in the back office and 72 hours of waiting, walked into them. Something lost on December 19, 2000 was at 11:23 in the morning on December 22, 2024 found. Funk stood up. I have concerns about the integrity of this process, she said. The collection occurred under unusual circumstances. I believe an independent review of the protocol is necessary before. Funk. Ogunlai said it quietly. He had not moved from his chair. Sit down, my sister. Something in the tone of it. The specific quiet of a man who has been patient for a very long time and has reached the end of the patience made the room go still. He reached into the manila folder on the table in front of him. He removed a document. 8 pages. Stapled in a plastic sleeve. He set it on the coffee table between them. This is a sworn and notarized testimony given by Grace Okonkwo before a licensed notary in Port Harcourt on August 5, 2024. Witnessed by Pastor Emmanuel Obi of Living Water Church, Rumuala, Port Harcourt. And countersigned by Barrister Grace Ease of Ease and Associates. He looked at Funk. Steadily. Grace Okonkwo signed this document in the presence of all 3 witnesses. She died 7 days later. She gave the document to her pastor before her death with instructions to contact retired Chief Superintendent Adebayo Ogunlai. She had kept my name from a newspaper article published in 2003. If her daughter Chidinma ever came forward with the necklace, he opened the folder. In this testimony, Grace Okonkwo states the following. That in November 2000 she was approached by a young woman, a niece of her employer, Mrs. Adeola Oni. That this woman offered her 427,000 naira to take the newborn infant from the hospital ward and leave Lagos permanently. That she agreed. He paused. Clock on the mantelpiece ticked twice. That on December 19, 2000, at approximately 11:40 in the evening, she entered the maternity ward of the hospital using her staff identification. She collected the infant from the nursery. She left through the staff exit. She took a night bus to Port Harcourt. He paused again. She states further that she had intended to hand the child over as arranged. That when the moment came, she could not. That she kept the child and raised her as her own. That she spent the remainder of her life in the space between the love she had for that child and the knowledge of what she had done. And that she kept the necklace on the child deliberately. Because she understood that one day, if anything was going to bring the girl home, it would be that necklace. He closed the folder. The name Grace Okonkwo gives in this testimony as the person who arranged and funded everything is Funk Adeyemi. Currently Funk Adeyemi Oni, niece of Mrs. Adeola Oni through the late Mrs. Beezy. The clock ticked 3 more times. Funk looked at the document. She looked at Ogunlai. She looked finally at Adeola, who had released Chidinma and turned around, and who was now looking at Funk with an expression that did not need words and did not have any. 23 years of Sunday lunches and Christmas mornings and charity galas and shared grief. All of it rearranging itself very quietly into the shape of something that had been there from the beginning, and had simply not been visible. I would like to speak to my lawyer, Funk said. That is your right, Ogunlai said. I ask only that you remain in this room until my colleagues from the Criminal Investigation Department arrive. I called them this morning. They are perhaps 15 minutes away. Funk sat. She placed her palms flat on her thighs. She looked at the far wall and did not speak again. Adeola looked at her for a long time. There was no screaming, no accusation, no theatrical reckoning. What there was something worse. The slow, quiet rearrangement of a life's understanding in a room full of people with a ticking clock and no way to undo any of it. Then Adeola turned back to Chidinma. She reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Chidinma's ear. A small gesture. Specific. Kind made with a person you have known a long time. Or with your own child. "Are you hungry?" she said. Chidinma blinked. "Yes, Ma." "Good." Adeola looked at Tund. He had raised his face from his hands. "Get her something to eat." Tund stood without another word and went to the kitchen. 'Cause some moments are too large and too particular for delegation. Funk was detained at 12:47 that afternoon. As she reached for her phone to access a ride service, Ogunlai's colleagues from the Criminal Investigation Department were quiet and professional. There were no handcuffs in the sitting room. She was walked to a vehicle in the driveway and driven away from the house. She said nothing as she left. But at the doorway she stopped for a moment. She looked at Chidinma once more. Whatever was in that look, Chidinma could not fully name it. It was not apology. It might have been recognition. The recognition that passes between two people when something has gone so far that no explanation or appeal is left. When there is nothing remaining to do but be seen for what you are by someone who now knows all of it. Chidinma watched her go. Kunal, near the door, let out a breath that had been held a long time. "I'm sorry," he said, "that you had to sit through all of that." "I'm glad I was here," she said. 3 months later. March 2025. Case of State versus Funk Adeyemioni came before the Lagos High Court. The charges, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, fraud, and misrepresentation sustained over a period of 23 years, obstruction of justice through attempted bribery of a forensic laboratory employee, and criminal coercion of a witness. It was not a simple case. No case this old ever is. Between Grace Okonkwo's notarized and witness testimony, financial records that showed a large unexplained deposit into Funk's personal account in January 2001, and the documented bribery attempt, reported, recorded, and formally added to the file, the prosecution had what it needed. The maximum applicable sentence was 21 years. On the day the prosecution finished its opening arguments, Chidinma Oni was asked if she wished to make a statement to the court. She stood at the front of the room. Navy blazer. Dark trousers. Hands in front of her in the way she stood when she needed to be still. "I want to say something that might seem strange," she began. "I do not want Funk Adeyemioni to be spared because she is connected to my family. I do not want her punished more harshly for the same reason. I want the punishment to be the one that serves accountability, not the one that serves anger." She paused. "What she did took 23 years from me and from my parents. It also took something from the woman who raised me. A woman who spent her whole life carrying guilt that it was not entirely hers to carry alone. 'Cause she had been offered money at a moment when she had very few choices. By someone who had many more. She steadied herself. I want accountability. I want her to stand fully in what she chose without anyone softening it for her. But I do not want revenge. Revenge would mean spending the rest of my life looking backward. I have a great deal ahead of me that I have not yet looked at." She sat down. The room was quiet for a moment. Adeola, 2 rows behind her, pressed her fingers to her lips. Tund looked at the floor and swallowed once, very slowly. The way a man swallows something that deserved to be said out loud and has chosen instead to hold it. Funk Adeyemioni received a sentence of 11 years. Reduced from the maximum in acknowledgement of her age, her eventual cooperation, and the formal recommendation of the primary victim's family. She was ordered to repay to the Oni estate all financial benefits received as a misrepresented family member. Calculated at 1,730 million naira across 23 years. Structured by court order into a managed repayment plan. She was also required to complete 400 hours of community service at registered children's welfare organizations in Lagos State. The judge read the sentence on a Tuesday morning. The evening headline read, "DNA test ends 23-year search for billionaire's kidnapped daughter." It was not wrong. But it was not the whole story. No headline ever contains the whole story. None of them found the thing about Funmileo's kitchen and the yam. None of them found Mama Grace, who had done a terrible thing and spent 23 years loving the person she had wronged against, who in the last 7 days of her life chose truth over safety. You cannot fit that in a headline. But it is the thing the story is actually about. There is something worth saying here before we close about what made any of this possible. DNA evidence is not magic. It is science in the shape of a cotton swab rubbed inside a cheek for 30 seconds. It is a sealed envelope. It is a laboratory running kinship analysis on 2 sets of genetic markers and arriving at a number so precise that it leaves no room for reasonable doubt. The Nigeria Missing Persons DNA Registry, operated through the Lagos State Health Management Agency and linked to the Interpol iFamilia International Database, allows families of missing persons to submit biological samples at no cost at participating health centers. Those samples are stored and cross-referenced indefinitely against profiles collected from unidentified individuals. A sample once registered does not expire. It waits. 1 year. 10 years. 23. For the Oni family, the wait was 17 years from the date of registration. It ended in 72 hours rather than decades because the infrastructure existed. For families who have lost someone, to kidnapping, to trafficking, to forced displacement, to the 1,000 circumstances through which people become separated from the people who belong to them, registering a DNA sample is one of the most powerful available actions. It requires no lawyer. It requires no money. It requires only the willingness to prepare in case the day ever comes. Not every taken child has a mama who keeps a necklace as an act of long-delayed conscience. The registry exists precisely for those who did not. 6 months later. June 2025. The Oni Group offices on the island. The senior staff who worked late on Mondays always came in slower on Thursdays. Coffee machine on the 3rd floor made it sound at a more leisurely pace. The building had a particular quality on Tuesday mornings that suggested it was gathering itself rather than already going. Chidinma Oni, 24 years old. Executive trainee. Grade 1. Lowest rung on the Oni Group organizational structure. A designation her parents had argued against and which she had refused to negotiate away. She was at her desk at 7:45 in the morning. She had been there since 7:30. Beside her, a stack of training materials she was working through in order. Supply chain documentation. Procurement contracts. Quarterly reports from the previous 4 financial years. Annotated in her own handwriting in the margins where she did not understand something or where she wanted to remember a question to ask someone. She had decided she was not going to understand how to lead any part of this company until she understood how every part of it worked from the ground by the people who did the actual work. "You are the heir," Tunt had said to her carefully, in the way he was still learning how to say things. "You do not need to start at the bottom." "I know I do not need to," she had said. "That is not the reason." He had looked at her for a moment with the expression a father wears for a daughter who is going to be more than he bargained for. "You are exactly like your mother," he had said. "God help all of us." On the wall of Chidinma's small office, given to her over her formal objection that a trainee did not require an office, overruled on the grounds that the CEO's daughter needed a door she could close, hung one framed object. Not a degree. Not a company award. Not a family photograph. A white uniform shirt. Hotel issue. The logo of Eco Hotel and Suites stitched above the left breast pocket. The one she had been wearing on December 19, 2024, at 9:47 in the evening. When the tray hit the marble floor. She had asked the hotel manager if she could keep it. He had said yes very quickly, with more apology than the question needed. Beneath the frame on the wall was a small card. Not printed. Written by hand. In the handwriting that Mama Grace had spent years making her practice, even when there were no proper notebooks to practice in. The steady, deliberate handwriting of someone who understood that how you wrote a thing was part of what the thing meant. 7 words. Person who serves you is someone's child. Kunal knocked on the glass of her open door at 9:15. "Good morning, Ma." He said it with the slight irony that had settled between them over the past months. Not mockery. Just the quiet acknowledgement of the new and somewhat absurd arrangement of things. He had not asked for a promotion. She had not offered one. They had remained what they had been from the beginning. 2 people who had been in a difficult room and come out of it without betraying each other. "Good morning," she said. "You are late." "I brought coffee." "You are forgiven." He came in. He placed a cup on the desk. He glanced at the wall the way he always looked at it when he came into this office. Quickly. With the brief attention of someone checking on something they have seen many times and still feel the need to confirm is actually there. "Your mother called the front desk this morning. She wants to know if you will come to the house for Sunday dinner." "Tell her yes." Chidinma did not look up from her papers. "And tell her she does not need to cook. There are restaurants in this city." "She will not listen to that." "I know." "Tell her anyway." He smiled. He turned to leave. "Kunal." She still did not look up. "Thank you for what you said in the car that morning." He paused. "What did I say?" "That I was already who I am before any of this." A moment passed. "I meant it," he said. He left. Chidinma set her pen down. She looked at the uniform on the wall. At Mama Grace's handwriting on the card beneath it. She looked for a long moment. Then she turned back to the procurement contract on her desk. Picked up her pen. Continued reading. 'Cause there was work to do. There was always work to do. And that, she had decided, was not a burden but a gift. The specific gift of a future that had been returned to her and that she intended to earn. 1 page of documentation at a time. She thought about Mama Grace sometimes. In the quiet moments between tasks. She thought about her sitting in that room in Port Harcourt with the biscuit tin under the bed. The weight of 23 years. 7 days left to live. The decision that had been made in those 7 days. What it cost. She thought, I am still angry. And I still love her. Both of those things can be true. She had learned in 6 months that the true stories are almost never the clean ones. That the people who save us are not always the people who did no wrong. That it is possible to carry someone's betrayal and their love at the same time, without either one canceling the other. Mama Grace's handwriting on the wall. Person who serves you is someone's child. Chidinma looked at it one more time. Then she went back to work. She thought about the biscuit tin, the bus ticket, the 6 months, the chandelier light catching the gold pendant at exactly 9:47 on December 19th. There is a thing people say when a story ends the way it should. When the person who was lost gets found. When what should have been true for years finally becomes true. They say it was fate. They say it was meant to be. Maybe. But here is what is also true. Mama Grace made a terrible choice in 2000 and a better one in 2024. Tired Chief Superintendent Ogunlai chose to keep a file alive for 18 years when no one was asking him to. Chidinma chose to put her last 37,000 naira on a bus ticket. Kunal chose to bring water to a girl in a back office when the easier, safer thing was to clean the glass and go back to his station. Every story like this one has a long list of choices inside it. The necklace was the evidence. People were the story. What stayed with me long after I first encountered this story was not the ballroom, not the DNA result, not the courtroom. It was Mama Grace, the woman who did the wrong thing and then spent 23 years loving the person she had wronged against, who could have taken her secret into the earth without consequence. The necklace would have been sold or lost. Chidinma would have lived her whole life as Chidinma from Port Harcourt who did not know where she came from. And no one would have found out. She chose differently. In the last 7 days of her life, she chose the truth over the safety of silence. That choice cost her everything she had left, and it gave her daughter the only thing she needed. I think about that often. I think about the fact that Grace Okonkwo spent 2 decades carrying something that had no good place to be put, that she kept 15 newspaper clippings folded in a biscuit tin under her bed. Not to remind herself of what she had done, she did not need reminding, but to keep the story available. To ensure that if the right moment came, the right person would have what they needed to find their way home. That is not innocence. But it is something. It is the specific something of a person who knows they cannot undo a wrong but who refuses to make it permanent. The lesson here is not really about class, though class is in every corner of this story. It is not really about DNA, though DNA carried the proof. It is not even really about the necklace, though the necklace is the thing that catches the light in the story center and makes everything else visible. It is about what happens when we choose, really choose, to see the person in front of us. Person who carries our glasses, who cleans our rooms, who holds our trays and refills our water and stays invisible in rooms that were not built for them. Adeola Oni saw the necklace first. Before the necklace caught the light, she did not see Chidinma. Most of us do not see the Chidinmas. Every Chidinma in every room. Quiet one. The efficient one. The one whose full name you do not know. Whose story you have not asked about. Whose presence you register only as a function and not as a life. That person is someone's child. Someone's whole story. You may not carry the answer to their story, but you can carry the habit of looking. That is worth sitting with. Long after this story is told.